Our next speaker, he was sitting there. He's a Canadian lawyer based in Alberta, known for his work in constitutional, criminal, and regulatory law, with a focus on defending individual rights and challenging government actions. He's represented class actions against the Alberta government for businesses' losses due to the pandemic. And I see he found a way to find a little extra time this time around. Me and him we were chuckling because the first go around he had 5 minutes. This time he's got a little extra time. Please give a warm welcome to lawyer Jeff Rath.
Like Byron Bridle, in recognition of the location that we find ourselves tonight and having a pulpit, I brought my Bible tonight. This is the Gospel according to St. Gary of Davidson, specifically the Alberta COVID-19 pandemic response data review final report. And when Gary was talking about it tonight, I was taken with a couple things. One, his really dry sense of humor that I just love, right? And the other thing is to how humble and understated Gary is with regard to all of the great work that he's done on all of our behalf. The amount of courage and fortitude that it took to guide this project from start to finish to create this final product, which at the end of the day isn't a Davidson report, it's a Daniel Smith report, it's a Government of Alberta report that sets out at length everything that was done to us and was done wrong to all of us throughout the so-called pandemic. Now, within that report, what we find is like everything else that we find in all things COVID related these days, is that a lot of us, probably a lot of the people here in this room, we're all right from day one with regard to what was going on and how wrong everything that the governments were doing throughout the COVID pandemic. This report actually confirms everything that we've all been saying and that we've all been worried about, especially with regard to the vaccines, citing really well-known sources, and I'm just going to use the AMA's phraseology for this, of anti-science, anti-evidence, misinformation, which according to Timothy Caulfield will take us back to the dark ages. And the sources of this anti-science misinformation are journals such as JAMA Cardiology, the Journal of Modern Medical Ethics, Lancet, right? Pfizer itself and all of Pfizer's own data are all the sources of misinformation cited in this report. And of course, when the AMA and all these other detractors that have a vested interest in protecting all of the doctors who repeatedly, spewed the mantra, safe and effective, without engaging in critical thought or engaging their brains or doing what it is that they were being paid $500 million to do, which was to critically examine the pros and cons of something, looking at all sides of the evidence, which one would expect in some form of scientific inquiry. Instead, we see all of the slogans that were spoken to by David Speaker, by Byron Bridle, all of which turned out to be completely wrong. Now, the three big takeaways that I want to point to within this report, because from my perspective, they are literally that shocking. And I'm not doing the slide thing tonight. I really urge everybody to download your own copy of the report, print it, and read it from cover to cover. Gary had to read it 100 times. I'm only about my 5th or 6th time so far. But every time I go through it, there's something else that I remark on, and I just go, I can't even believe that this happened to us, right? And let's start now with, one of the first things that caused me the most concern, because I think as some of you know, we're doing a vaccine class action lawsuit, and we're representing Carrie Sakamoto. And Carrie was horribly injured, because she followed Dina Hinshaw's so-called medical advice. And that medical advice that she spewed from the podium while she was on TV, that she put out on her Twitter, that Justin Trudeau himself was promoting, and that Theresa Tam was promoting, and all the so-called chief medical officers of health were promoting, was this remarkable idea that a vaccine buffet was a good idea. That somehow or other it was safe and effective, and in fact, Hinshaw said it's recommended because it'll improve your immune response if you mix the vaccines. So now you turn to the vaccine chapter in Dr. Davidson's report, and it's at Appendix 6, and what you find is a synopsis of a massive 23 million person surveillance study that was done by all the Nordic countries, so Denmark, Sweden, Norway. You know, those backward third world countries that nobody wants to trust anything that comes out of them, let alone like the Nobel Prize or any of those types of things, right? So those three countries, 23 million people were studied. So what they found out of 23 million people, and again, we'll talk about this in a little bit with regard to informed consent. If you took the Pfizer shot and you were between the ages of 14 and 24, you were 5 times more likely to contract myocarditis. If you took the Moderna shot, you were 16 times more likely to contract myocarditis. And if you mixed the shots, you were 36 times or 3,600% more likely to contract myocarditis if you mixed the shots, which Dina Hinshaw, in what I term, complete gross medical negligence, repeatedly told people was safe and effective in the province of Alberta, right? Huge takeaway. This is a government report. This is government information. I would note for the record that Dr. Mark Joffe, who's the current CMOH, who was also a big vaccine booster at the beginning of this within AHS, has yet to rescind that guidance. So pharmacists in the province don't know that they should be checking patients' histories, trying to determine what their last booster was. I talked to my own pharmacist. He says, oh yeah, we can mix them. So we don't even check if they got Moderna last time or Pfizer. I said, you got to stop doing that. He says, why? I said, JAMA cardiology, right? And this, massive, surveillance study that was done in the Nordic countries. Oh my God, nobody told us. College of Pharmacy didn't tell them. Nobody's rescinded the guidance. That study has been out since 2023. And of course, this report, has been out, and nobody's paying any attention to the safety signal that comes from a JAMA cardiology article. Another, I would suggest, keynote article in that report is a Lancet article, where Lancet found that fully 53% of children given the Pfizer vaccine developed myocarditis so bad that it could be measured by appropriate medical tests and blood testing and so on, right? And then of those, 52 or 53% of children that had testable myocarditis from getting the shots, fully 26% of them could not return to normal physical activity after getting the shots, and another 20 some odd percent were still on cardiac medications, months after getting the shots because the myocarditis was so bad they needed ongoing cardiac care as if they were 70-year-old fat men like myself, right? So, this is what has happened to our province and our children. All of this information was available publicly beforehand had anybody bothered to read it. Table 14 of Pfizer's own EUA said that they were notionally going to save 1 life per million of children from myocarditis, but they were from COVID, but they were going to put 34 children per million into hospital with myocarditis so bad they would have to be on a ventilator in ICU. And then you get to the end of the table, and I actually filed a letter with the RCMP saying Pfizer should be investigated for fraud over this, because you get to the table, deaths posited from the vaccine, remarkably, they put 0. So, and keep in mind, that was just myocarditis. So anybody talking, any emergency room physician or any ICU specialist dealing with children, pediatric ICU, they'll tell you that you cannot put 34 children on a vent having myocarditis so badly that they need it and lose none of them. The actual numbers would be closer to 6 or 7 children would die before they got off the vent, yet Pfizer said 0 positive deaths from the vaccine. And then, of course, we know about them scrubbing a transverse myelitis death from their testing. We know about them not completely ignoring potential deaths from good old-fashioned anaphylaxis, right? But the problem for Pfizer, and why I say that table indicates fraud on the part of Pfizer that was ignored by the government, is if they put any numeral other than 0 in the column deaths caused by the vaccine, any number 1 or greater would mean that the deaths from the vaccine were the same or greater than COVID, which is the disease that they are seeking to vaccinate against, and no vaccine regulator in the world could approve the drug, right? So this is what we've been laboring under. Everybody that's watching this, everybody in this room needs to know, I personally wrote Dina Hinshaw before the childhood vaccine the childhood vaccine rollout happened. I sent her a copy of the Pfizer EUA table. I sent a copy of it to Trudeau. I sent a copy of it to Tam. I sent a copy of it to Jason Kenney. I sent a copy of it to Verna Yu. And notwithstanding the fact that they were all advised that Pfizer's own data showed that the vaccines would kill more children than COVID, they approved the vaccine and told every parent in this province that the vaccines were safe and effective and approved for their children. Now, that's a level of negligence that all of us need to be pretty angry over. The other big takeaway from this Alberta government report is the section dealing specifically that, I can't say my friend Dr. Davidson because he doesn't want anybody to know in public that we're actually friends, so I won't say that. I'll just say that's a habit from being in court all the time. My friend Dr. Davidson. So one of the other huge takeaways from this report, and Gary was alluding to it earlier, and that is specifically that Pfizer somehow managed to lose 200 and some odd charts for women that got pregnant while they're vaccinated. But of the 32 charts that they had, 1 normal pregnancy. So if you can do the math on Pfizer's own data, right, the spontaneous miscarriages or spontaneous abortion rate of the Pfizer vaccine was 96.9% in the charts that they reported on. And at that point, everybody here needs to know that at 96.9% abortion rate for the Pfizer shot, that's a better abortion rate than the morning after pill, which is only 94 to 96% effective. So, when Dina Hinshaw was standing up without any data and without understanding what's going on and telling pregnant women in this province that the vaccine was safe and effective, she didn't tell them it was safe and effective as an abortion drug, because that's what they were selling here on the basis of Pfizer's own data. Remarkably, you go into the AHS data on miscarriages, surprise, surprise, no data available after July 30th, 2021, right? So when Dr. Davidson talks about the lack of cooperation from Alberta government bureaucrats, Alberta Health, AHS, et cetera, right? That's what he's talking about. That data is there, the information is within the government, and they have done everything they can to hide and obfuscate the degree of culpability that all of them have with regard to all of the horrible things that have happened to people as a result of these vaccines in the province of Alberta. So there's that. Now, the one thing I want to wrap up on really quickly is when Dr. Davidson was talking about pushback within government, he was being very kind, as he often is. But what people need to understand is that there are people in government, specifically in cabinet, that have a continued vested interest in keeping this information from reaching the public, right? And specifically what I'm talking about is every holdover from the Jason Kenney COVID cabinet, currently in Daniel Smith's cabinet. Everybody needs to be demanding that they resign or that Daniel Smith remove them from office on the basis now that they have been found, and this is in our other class action lawsuit, which is the business class action, which was certified as a class action by Justice Feasby. In that certification ruling, Justice Feasby found that it was plausible that there was a plausible misfeasance in public office by every member of the Kenney cabinet that willfully and knowingly promulgated fake CMOH orders because they didn't want to put their name to Emergencies Act orders and take political responsibility in their own constituencies and instead hide behind Dina Hinshaw. So, you know, this has been a really interesting journey. You make some kind of interesting friends along the way, and one of the people that I've made friends with as a result of my work is Premier Brian Peckford. And I'll just leave you guys with this thought. So I asked Brian Peckford, he's the only living premier that I know that would talk to me, so I phoned Brian up and I said, Brian, I said, what would you have done when you were premier if members of your cabinet was found by a Superior Court judge to have plausibly engaged in a misfeasance in public office? And Premier Peckford said, well, what else could you do? We work under the doctrine of ministerial responsibility. If those ministers did not resign immediately and remove themselves from cabinet while those matters were pending before the court, as premier, it would be my responsibility to ask them to step down until such time as the matters pending before the court were resolved. And, you know, this is something that I would like all of you to consider. And when you think about some of the brave MLAs and ministers that have been standing up and saying, look, we're not going to take this garbage anymore, think about who it is that they're complaining about. You know, when Pete Guthrie says, I have a whole bunch of concerns, who do you think he's concerned about? I'll wager you it's mainly people left over from the Kenney cabinet, all of who've been found to have plausibly engaged in a misfeasance in public office. And from my perspective, if we want to get to the bottom of all of this and really solve the problems in this province, all of them have to go. So I'm out of time. So thank you for your time and attention. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to address all of you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Jeff Rath, folks. Take it back. Yep.